All right, I recently downloaded a huge file. It was a huge torrent file, to be honest, of Heavy Metal Magazine, and it had a whole bunch of special issues in it that were published sort of as an aside to the main publication. And they had like graphic novels of some stories, or they featured specific artists on some of these special issues. But this one of the special issues was a book called, or a story, a side publication called So Beautiful, So Dangerous by artist, and I think he was the author as well, Angus Mackay. So I'm not unfamiliar with it, with his work. I just have not really stared at it in a while, and it kind of inspired me to channel my inner Angus Mackay with this one. So I am working. Of course, I have this sped up, but I'm working on a Wacom Intuos Bluetooth, the small one, the cheap one. I think it was like 40 bucks, and 46 somewhere around there. It's like 6 inches by 7.5 inches, so it's kind of small. And it's goofy to use, but I love how it forces me to stay loose and sketchy, or in this case, give you that impressionistic look, because I'm not drilling into the screen with my eyeballs and my face and chasing after extreme levels of detail and getting in over my head. But I guess maybe I did that a little bit here, but it could have been worse. It could have been worse if I was using one of my screen tablets. And I'm just chasing after always that illusion of detail and functionality, adding panels and buttons and lights and switches and whatever, and working in maybe a little figure work with some figures, right? A lady control person and a robot doing some stuff and some ships in the background. Just standard sci-fi trope stuff, right? In a hangar bay, and I'm just riffing off of whatever comes to mind, and sometimes I see shapes in the paint and I follow up with it to try to make something coherent. I diffuse the image out of the mess, out of the noise. I was having a little bit of problem getting the right position for those hands, but I think I finally, whatever, I was just trying to whip out a quick sketch. I don't know, I got so carried away worrying about some of that anatomy detail, but it was a good excuse to practice. And I'm kind of on a kick with that Intuos, because you can crank out ideas quick, and I don't feel so committed to the idea, like I have to bring it to some kind of amazing crescendo of a conclusion. I can create a whole ton of these things in a couple hours. Actually, this one took me a little longer because I got a little carried away. I was having fun with the idea and the design and adding the gerbles. I've not been completely unfamiliar with Angus Mackay's work. Of course, he is. If you're a sci-fi dork, then you would know that about the Terran Trade Authority Handbook, where he was featured prominently, and he had some of the more famous images. I think he had that. Um, it was like a shark. The spaceship was shaped like a needle, sort of like a pointed needle with a teardrop bulge in the middle, and it was flying in front of these Death Star ships. And it would be curious to know if he did that image before Star Wars came out or after. But I will flash that image up here. so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm just coming up with just blasting garbage weirdo detail on there and throwing some silly ships, trying to make that outline pop. And I'm working on making it stand out a little bit because I'm trying to send these things to the printer, to the inkjet, but printing anything on the inkjet is interesting. By interesting, I mean difficult, because it will be very dark and you gotta keep playing with it to get the right tonality and keep it from looking like it's just all washed out in darkness or blacked out. And then if you crank up the light too much, it will wash out in brightness, what you didn't want to wash out. But some the things will other corners will come out darker or lighter. It's just kind of a goofy mess. Even with the correct color profile, it seems to be a struggle. And I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong, but I've always it always has been sort of difficult to master that portion of it. Anyway, I think I'm getting close to the end, so if you stuck around this long, I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Thanks much. Bye.